Growing up, I always felt like an outsider in my own family. Every holiday gathering, every birthday party, every family reunion felt like walking into a room full of people who wished I wasn't there. My dad's family would give me those cold, distant looks that made my stomach twist into knots. I spent years wondering what I had done wrong, what made them hate me so much. Little did I know the answer would shatter everything I believed about my life. Before I share this story that changed everything, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that matter. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next because this discovery turned my entire world upside down. My name is Harper, and at 28 years old, I thought I knew who I was. I worked as a graphic designer in Portland, lived in a cozy apartment downtown, and had what most people would consider a normal life. But normal was something that had always felt just out of reach for me, especially when it came to my dad's side of the family. My family seemed simple enough on the surface. There was my dad William, my mom Janet, and me. I was their only child born and raised in Oregon. But the moment we stepped into any gathering with my paternal grandparents, Frank and Dorothy, my Aunt Betty, my Uncle George, and his kids, the temperature in the room seemed to drop by 20 degrees. I have vivid memories of being 7 years old at Christmas, sitting on the floor by the tree while everyone else chatted and laughed around the dinner table. My grandmother Dorothy would glance at me with this expression I couldn't quite understand back then. It wasn't just dislike. It was something deeper, more troubling. She would whisper things to my grandfather Frank, and I would catch fragments like, "That child doesn't belong," or "I still don't understand why William." My Aunt Betty was even worse. She had this way of making cutting remarks that went right over my head as a kid, but stung my heart nonetheless. "Some families just have their complications," she would say while staring directly at me, or "certain situations are better left in the past," whenever I tried to join conversations about family history. Uncle George and his children treated me like I was invisible. His kids, my supposed cousins, would play together while I sat alone watching from the sidelines. When I tried to join their games, George would suddenly find reasons to take them to another room. "Let's go see what's in the kitchen," he would say, and they would all disappear, leaving me sitting there wondering what I had done wrong. The only person who ever showed me genuine love and affection was my dad. William would scoop me up in his arms, tell me bedtime stories, and make me feel like I was the most precious thing in the world. When I would cry after particularly difficult family gatherings, he would hold me close and say, "Don't worry about them, sweetheart. They're just set in their ways. You're perfect exactly as you are." But even my dad seemed nervous around his family when it came to me. I noticed how he would change the subject whenever I asked questions about why Grandma and Grandpa didn't seem to like me. "They just need time to warm up," he would say. But years passed, and nothing changed. I threw myself into being the perfect granddaughter, hoping that somehow I could earn their love. I got straight A's in school, won art contests, volunteered at church events. I memorized everyone's birthdays and made handmade cards. I helped serve dinner at family gatherings and cleaned up afterward without being asked. Nothing I did made any difference. As I grew older, the feeling of being an outsider only intensified. During my teenage years, I started noticing things that seemed odd. I looked nothing like anyone in my dad's family. Where they had dark hair and brown eyes, I had auburn hair and green eyes. Where they were all tall and lanky, I was petite with different facial features entirely. When I mentioned this to my mom, she would just smile and say, "You got the best features from both sides." But something about her smile never quite reached her eyes when she said it. The first real crack in the facade happened when I was 27 at my grandfather Frank's funeral. He had died suddenly of a heart attack, and while I felt sad about losing him, I couldn't pretend we had ever been close. Throughout the service, I noticed my Aunt Betty and Uncle George having hushed conversations in corners, always stopping when anyone approached. After the burial, I was helping to clean up at my grandmother's house when I overheard something that made my blood run cold. I was carrying dishes to the kitchen when I heard Betty and George talking in low voices on the back porch. Now that Dad's gone, don't you think we should tell William the truth? Betty was saying. This has gone on long enough. Absolutely not, George replied firmly. We promised Dad we would never speak of it. A promise is a promise, especially to a dying man. But that girl? She has a right to know, Betty continued. No, George said sharply. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. William made his choice 28 years ago, and we all have to live with it. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. What secret? What choice had my dad made 28 years ago? That was exactly when I was born. I managed to slip away without being noticed, but their words haunted me for weeks. I started paying closer attention to family conversations, noting how everyone would fall silent whenever I entered a room. I began to notice the looks that passed between family members when they thought I wasn't watching. The more I observed, the more convinced I became that there was something significant being hidden from me. I started looking through old family photos, studying faces, and trying to find resemblances. The more I looked, the more obvious it became that I didn't fit the genetic pattern of my dad's family. One evening, while helping my mom organize some old paperwork, I came across my birth certificate. Something about it looked off. The paper seemed newer than it should have been for a document that was 27 years old, and there were faint marks that suggested it might have been altered or reprinted. When I asked my mom about it, she became flustered. Oh, that old thing, we had to get a new copy a few years back when the original got damaged in a basement flood. You know how these old documents get. But we had never had a basement flood. And I had never seen my birth certificate before that day. I decided to confront my dad directly. One Sunday afternoon, I asked him to sit down for a serious conversation. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there something about my birth or our family that I don't know about? The color drained from William's face instantly. His hands started shaking and he looked anywhere but directly at me. Harper, sweetheart, why would you ask something like that? Because your family has treated me like an outsider my entire life. Because I don't look like any of you. Because I heard Aunt Betty and Uncle George talking about some secret involving you and me. Because my birth certificate looks like it's been tampered with. William stood up abruptly and started pacing around the living room. You don't need to worry about any of that. Some families have complicated dynamics. You're my daughter, and that's all that matters. But I could see the panic in his eyes. I could hear the tremor in his voice. Something was definitely wrong. The breakthrough came in the most unexpected way. My mom, Janet, had been feeling unwell for a few weeks, complaining of headaches and fatigue. One night, she spiked a high fever, and we had to rush her to the emergency room. While she was being treated, the fever made her delirious. I was sitting beside her hospital bed when she started mumbling incoherently. At first, it was just random words and phrases, but then she said something that made my heart stop. I'm so sorry, Sarah. She whispered, her eyes closed and her voice thick with medication and fever. I tried to love her like my own. I tried to raise your baby girl the way you would have wanted. Sarah. I had never heard that name mentioned in our family before, and she had said, your baby girl, not our baby girl. I leaned closer to her bedside. Mom, who is Sarah? But she had drifted back into unconscious sleep, leaving me with more questions than ever. The next morning, when my mom was feeling better and the fever had broken, I gently asked her about what she had said the night before. She claimed she didn't remember anything and insisted that fever dreams weren't something to worry about, but I couldn't let it go. I spent the next several weeks researching the name Sarah in connection with my family. I searched through old newspaper archives, social media, public records, anything I could find. Finally, I discovered something that made my hands shake as I read it. There had been a Sarah Thompson, my dad's sister, who had died in a car accident 28 years ago. She had been 22 years old when she died, just 6 months after giving birth to a daughter. The daughter's name was not listed in any of the articles I found. I hired a private investigator named Lucas Martinez to help me dig deeper into the records. What he found changed everything I thought I knew about my life. Sarah Thompson had indeed been my father's younger sister. She had died in a single-car accident on a rainy night in March when her baby daughter was only 6 months old. But here's what made my stomach drop. The baby had been born in September, exactly 28 years ago, the same month and year I was born. Lucas managed to obtain copies of legal documents that revealed the truth I had been searching for my entire life. After Sarah's death, William and Janet had legally adopted her infant daughter. They had changed the child's name from Sarah's chosen name to Harper Thompson and had raised her as their own biological child. I was that baby. Sarah Thompson was my biological mother, and William was my uncle, not my father. Janet was no relation to me at all. She was just the woman who had agreed to help William raise his deceased sister's child. But there was more. Lucas discovered that my dad's family had been vehemently opposed to the adoption. They had wanted the baby to be placed with a different family far away from their own. According to legal documents, there had been heated arguments and even threats from the grandparents and other family members. The reason for their opposition was buried in police reports and witness statements from the time of Sarah's death. Sarah had been unmarried when she gave birth, and the father of her child was a married man who had refused to acknowledge paternity. The family considered this a scandal that would tarnish their reputation if they raised the child. My grandmother Dorothy had apparently said, according to witness statements, "That baby is a reminder of Sarah's mistakes. We cannot have that burden in our family." Even worse, I learned that Sarah had been struggling with depression and had been drinking the night she died. Some family members whispered that her death might not have been entirely accidental, though this was never proven. They blamed her reckless lifestyle for bringing shame to the family. Armed with this information, I knew I had to confront my grandmother Dorothy directly. She was now 86 years old and living alone since my grandfather's death. I drove to her house on a Saturday afternoon, my heart pounding with every mile. When I knocked on her door, she looked surprised to see me. "Harper, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you about Sarah," I said firmly. "I need to know the truth about my mother." Her face went completely white. She tried to close the door, but I put my hand against it. "Grandmother, please. I already know most of it. I just need to understand why you've hated me my entire life." Dorothy's composure cracked entirely. 28 years of buried resentment came pouring out. "Your mother was a disgrace," she shouted. "She got pregnant by a married man, refused to tell us who he was, and then went and got herself killed driving drunk with a baby at home. She brought nothing but shame to this family. And you blamed me for that," I asked, my voice breaking. "I was just a baby." "You were a constant reminder of her mistakes." Dorothy continued, her voice harsh and unforgiving. "Every time I looked at you, I saw her poor choices. I saw the scandal she brought to our family name. William should have let you be adopted by strangers, but he was too soft-hearted. He ruined his own life and his marriage by taking you in. So you decided to make my childhood miserable because of choices my mother made before I could even walk." Dorothy's eyes were cold as ice. "I did what I thought was best for this family. You were never really one of us anyway." I left my grandmother's house feeling devastated but also strangely relieved. At least now I knew the truth. But there was still one more piece of the puzzle I needed to find. I went straight to my dad's house and demanded that he tell me everything. William broke down completely when he saw that I already knew most of the story. Through tears, he told me the rest. Sarah had left a letter before she died naming the father of her child. It was a man named Thomas Anderson, a prominent businessman who had been one of Sarah's clients at the marketing firm where she worked. Thomas was married with 2 children of his own, and when Sarah told him she was pregnant, he had threatened to ruin her career if she ever revealed that he was the father. Sarah had been planning to raise me alone, but her death had left William as my only family member, willing to take responsibility for me. His parents, Frank and Dorothy, had given him an ultimatum. Give me up for adoption to a family outside their social circle, or risk being disowned and cut off from the family business. William had chosen me. He had legally adopted me, married Janet, who agreed to help raise me, and had spent the last 28 years protecting me from the truth of how unwanted I had been by the rest of his family. "I love you more than anything in this world, Harper," he sobbed. "You are my daughter in every way that matters. I just never wanted you to know how cruel they had been about your existence." After learning the complete truth, I felt like I had been living someone else's life for 28 years. But instead of feeling destroyed by this revelation, something inside me began to shift. I realized that I had been seeking approval from people who had made a decision to reject me before I had even learned to crawl. Their hatred had nothing to do with who I was as a person and everything to do with their own prejudices and shame. My first decision was to track down Thomas Anderson. It took some effort, but I found him living in a wealthy suburb of Seattle. He was now 62 years old, still married to the same woman with his 2 legitimate children, now adults with families of their own. I called his office and arranged to meet him under the pretense of a business consultation. When he walked into the conference room and saw me, his face went completely pale. I looked exactly like Sarah, and he knew immediately who I was. "You're Sarah Thompson's daughter," he said quietly, sinking into a chair. "I'm your daughter," I corrected him, "and I'm here to tell you something important." Thomas looked terrified, probably thinking I was going to demand money or threaten to expose him to his family. Instead, I stood up and looked him directly in the eyes. "I want you to know that I turned out perfectly fine without you. I have a college degree, a successful career, and people who love me. I'm not here for your money or your acknowledgement. I'm here to tell you that your cowardice 28 years ago cost you the chance to know an amazing person. That's your loss, not mine." Thomas started to stammer out an apology, but I held up my hand to stop him. "I don't need your apologies. I don't need anything from you. I just wanted you to see what you missed out on when you chose to threaten my mother instead of taking responsibility for your actions. She died thinking she was alone in the world, but she wasn't a mistake. And neither am I." I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't need his validation or his presence in my life. The fact that I had survived and thrived despite his abandonment was victory enough. Next, I decided to have one final conversation with my dad's family. I arranged for all of them to come to dinner at a restaurant. My grandmother, Dorothy, my Aunt Betty, my Uncle George, and his children who were now adults. When everyone was seated, I stood up and addressed the table. "I've spent my entire life wondering what was wrong with me that made you all treat me like an outsider. Now I know the truth about who I am and why you've always resented my existence. I want you to understand something. I didn't choose to be born into your family drama. I was an innocent child who deserved love and acceptance regardless of the circumstances of my birth." Betty started to interrupt, but I continued talking. "You had 28 years to get to know me as a person, 28 years to see that I was kind, intelligent, hardworking, and loving. Instead, you chose to punish me for my mother's choices. You chose to let your pride and your judgment poison any possibility of a real relationship." I looked directly at my grandmother, Dorothy. "You said I was never really one of you anyway. You're right. I'm not like you. I would never treat a child the way you treated me. I would never let my prejudices override my compassion." George tried to say something about family loyalty and tradition, but I cut him off. "Family loyalty? You showed no loyalty to Sarah when she needed support. You showed no loyalty to an innocent baby who needed love. You only showed loyalty to your own reputation and your own comfort." I pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table. "These are copies of all the legal documents about my adoption, all the evidence of how you tried to force my dad to abandon me. I want you to know that despite your best efforts to erase me from this family, I have thrived. I am successful, I am loved, and I am proud of who I am." Standing up to leave, I delivered my final statement. "I'm done seeking your approval. I'm done wondering if I'm good enough for this family. From now on, you're the ones who will have to wonder if you're good enough for me. And based on how you've behaved for the past 28 years, you're not." I walked out of that restaurant and never looked back. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free from their judgment and their conditional love. My relationship with William took time to rebuild, but we worked through it together. I understood why he had kept the truth from me. He was trying to protect me from exactly the kind of pain I had just experienced. His love for me had been real and unconditional from the very beginning, and that was what mattered most. I also began to learn about my biological mother, Sarah, through her personal belongings that William had saved. She'd been a talented artist and writer dreams that she never got to fully pursue because of her circumstances. Reading her journals and looking at her artwork, I could see parts of myself that I had never understood before. My creative abilities, my sensitivity, my determination, they all came from her. Instead of feeling bitter about her early death, I chose to honor her memory by living the life she never got the chance to live. I started taking painting classes, began writing in a journal like she had, and made peace with the fact that she had loved me even though she had struggled with her own demons. I also started going to therapy to work through the years of feeling rejected and unloved. It helped me understand that the problem had never been with me. It had always been with people who chose judgment over love, reputation over compassion. Today I live my life completely free from the opinions of people who never took the time to know my heart. I have built my own family of chosen friends and supportive people who love me for exactly who I am. I wake up every morning knowing that I am worthy of love, not because of who my parents were or weren't, but because of who I choose to be. The truth that I spent 28 years searching for was painful when I first learned it, but it also set me free in ways I never could have imagined. I am no longer the little girl sitting alone by the Christmas tree wondering why she doesn't belong. I am Harper, a woman who knows her own worth and refuses to accept anything less than genuine love and respect. Sometimes the truth hurts before it heals, but it always sets you free. And freedom, I have learned, is worth every moment of pain it takes to achieve it. What about you? Have you ever discovered something about your family that completely changed how you saw your life? Drop a comment below and share your story. I read every single one, and your experiences might help someone else who's going through something similar. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your own strength. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's acceptance. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you are enough exactly as you are. Until next time, keep choosing love over judgment and truth over comfort.